I cannot imagine raising my children anywhere else. I can definitely, as Carl said, I can imagine taking our children to another country for short periods of time and experiencing their culture, most definitely. And we'd actually like to do that. We've been wanting to do that for a few years. But Australia would still be the country that we would return to.
I'm Dr. Shamany TV, ex-corporate and academical turned CEO and board member of several companies and mother of 4 little extraordinary kids. But it wasn't that long ago that I lacked the confidence, the know-how, and the time to focus on designing and really going after the life that I so wanted to live. A life of freedom, of fairness, and of being fair dinkum to who I really was and what I wanted to get out of this fleeting time that we have on Mother Earth. Fast forward to many lessons learned and moving halfway around the world to the most amazing country, you'll see the life that I now live. One that gives me more safety and freedom than I ever thought would be possible, and that really only existed as a daydream while I was living in South Africa. I created Shamany TV to give you true spot advice on how you can also live a life in this amazing country, and so that you can see how another couple like us now live in Australia with 4 little kids here in Down Under. And I'll be providing you with step-by-step strategies so that you can make your Aussie dream a reality too. If you're a keen future Aussie who's looking to create a life that excites you and offers you safety, freedom, and opportunity, you have come to the right place, my friend. Welcome aboard.
Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Shamany TV. And thanks for joining us, because this one is a special one. It's number 100. Yes, that's right. We have made it to 100 episodes. And not that I didn't think we would make it to 100, but yes, the time has come and it's here. It's actually gone faster than what I thought. And for today's episode, I wanted to bring you an episode that's a little bit different to the usual ones where I interview other people. I thought today I will interview this lovely chap here next to me. And it's actually not going to be an interview as such. It's probably going to be more a bit telling our story, our Australian journey to Australia, and sharing it with you here in the room with us. Hopefully you've got a coffee ready. And yes, let's get going.
Irish coffee.
And well, any coffee that you prefer. So thank you, Carl, for being here. That's his name, Carl. How long have you been in Australia for?
Going on 16 years. Almost.
He is very close to 16 years. I, on the other hand, have been here 17 years and 4 months. So yes, as you can tell, we didn't quite arrive in Australia at the same time. But I will let Carl share how and why he got to Australia. So what made you move to Australia?
Well, it sort of just gave it away because you were already here. I was still elsewhere. And we decided we're going to do this thing called life together. So destination start would be here. We're still at destination start, but this is a big destination.
That's right. We decided to make our commitment to each other something a bit more formal, and that was while I was living in Australia and Carl was still living in South Africa. So we were doing a long distance relationship for, good grief, I don't even know how many months it was. It was a long time. But while I was away, after I left South Africa, we realized that we couldn't be without each other. And Carl came to visit first. That was his first time out of South Africa, the day he came to visit me in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we decided that we're going to make
it work.
Make it work. We wanted to make it work, not we had to make it work. But then it was an interesting journey, because tell us about how you got your visa.
Okay. So you were still on your student visa.
I came as an international student to Australia.
I was on no visa. And long story short, the quickest way for me to get here was for us to get married.
So he was on no visa because he was still in South Africa.
So we did that fairly quickly. It was about a week since deciding, okay, this is our option. We'll make it work. We got married. We got the visa. I resigned, sold my house, I sold my car. And 3 weeks later, we were both on the plane and my container was on the ship. Well, probably in the docks, but yeah, on the ship.
Just like that. And then he called his friends and said, hey, hi, I'm
going away.
I'm going away.
By the way, I'm married. So I had my bachelor's after my wedding.
Things happened a little bit fast for us. Needless to say, we had a number of people waiting for the news that there was a baby on the way pretty imminently, because usually for many people who get married really fast and unexpectedly, there is usually something else. And in our case, the baby wasn't a baby in my tummy. The baby was us, Visan wanting to live together and be together like we are doing now and have been doing for the past 16 years. So congratulations on our wedding anniversary just last week. Okay, so finally you got the visa.
Yep.
Because they said
student visa.
Yep, they said that he could be a dependent on my student visa. I was an international student studying at Curtin University.
So nothing permanent.
Yes, no, we didn't have permanent residency, so we took all these big decisions, made them, and took all these steps in a leap of faith, hoping that we would be able to stay on in Australia. Well, that was the intention anyway, was to be here. So my parents had already been living in Australia by that time for 3 years. And so I was living with my parents, and then it was beautiful because the first, how many months of our marriage? 6 months of our marriage, I think.
Yeah, about 6.
Carl moved in with his in-laws for the first 6 months of our marriage. Was that fun?
It was not difficult at all.
Very lucky that he gets along with my parents really well. And we literally were staying with my parents for that time because my dad's a GP and he was working in Perth at that point in time. And I was a full-time student, and Carl had just moved to Australia with me, and he was on a temporary visa. So tell us a little bit about finding a job those first few months, and how did that go for you? And what's your background? What do you do as an occupation?
Wow, that's not so easy to explain. I work in finance.
That's easy.
Numbers. For those that know what the Treasury is, or the Treasury Department, I work in that. So in South Africa, I worked in foreign exchange risk management. Here, I did a little bit of that, and then I got involved in banking treasury.
So I like to think of him as the guy that works with numbers, money and numbers. At least, in our relationship, there's one of us doing that really well.
I studied accounting, but just never really fond of it. I liked it at school, though, but at uni.
Okay, so married me, and then you left a really top job in South Africa. The things you do for love, I tell you. He had a great job. He was doing really well. You enjoyed your job in Joburg at that point in time, Johannesburg. So how did you approach the market those first few months?
Well, first, you don't know the market at first, so I generally just approached recruitment agencies, and got a temp job, contract temp, probably same thing.
Yep.
For a few months, and essentially sort of gave notice because opportunity came up for us in Brisbane, and we trekked across the Nullarbor If you don't know what the Nullarbor is, go and Google it. And that was a good adventure, just getting to Brisbane. Yeah, it's pity the channel wasn't up back then.
Yes, that would have been an interesting journey to vlog.
Wouldn't have been 100 sunsets, but it was a few quick sunsets because we had to get in Brisbane.
And we'll touch upon what 100 sunset is in a second. But we had to get to Brisbane. And why did you only get temp jobs at that point in time, do you think?
Well, probably because I was just on a temporary visa. So that plays a part. Things would probably have been different if I was on a permanent residency visa at the time. But it also depends on in terms of what your background is, where you end up. Opportunities are multiple across Australia, but you do still have certain hubs which focuses more on certain industries. Doesn't mean that there are no opportunities in all industries, but some are just more opportunities in certain industries than others.
That's true.
No different to South Africa. You're going to have different opportunities in Pretoria that you might have in Bloemfontein
or any other country,
or in Joburg that you might have in Durban. It just depends on what industry you're working in and where the head office of those larger organizations tend to be.
So we made it to Brisbane. And why did we go to Brisbane?
We had a job opportunity that came about. Well, us.
Although I wasn't working for that job. And by this time I had finished my studies. I just finished my master's degree.
So it all sort of just worked out well at the time, timing wise. A few things in life work out timing wise well, but this one did.
Yeah.
So the job in Brisbane was a new startup business with South African links, and from the company that I worked for in South Africa. So it was sort of a natural connection from both sides. Me being here, bing.
Lots of bing-bings.
I was already here. They started up the business. They had one of the investors was also ex-South African and also on the side of the coast. So just sort of determined the destination. And we said, well, we've got nothing to lose. Let's give it a go.
And we gave it a go.
Brisbane it was.
And at that point, as I said, I just finished my qualification. So I came to Australia as an international student, as I mentioned just now. But I came to study at first a master's degree in adult education or tertiary education, which is like training or development or giving information to adults and teaching them essentially. So I did a bit of lecturing while I was doing that as well later on. But yeah, I studied Masters of Education, and then at the end of that year, I needed to study another year because to be able to apply for permanent residency in Australia, I had to have studied 2 years in Australia. And then I applied for another master's degree in education, and I completed another one, and it was just a variation of my previous master's degree, essentially. So then I qualified with 2 master's degrees in higher education. And then that had put us in a position where I could actually apply for my permanent residency visa, but I could put Carl on my visa as well because he was my dependent on my student visa for longer than 6 months. And those were the rules at that point in time. And because he had been on my visa for that long, I could add him. And of course, we were married at that stage. So we went to Brisbane. Carl was going to do this new job, which was very similar to what he used to do in South Africa, and he loved it. And I was looking for a job. I wanted to say my first job in Australia, but that wouldn't be my first, because while I was studying, I actually started working at Curtin University as a temp or a casual in their international office. And I then started venturing and doing other bits and pieces around the university just as an extra income. And that went really well. I made a lot of friends, learned how the system works, which is really good. Volunteered a lot as well, and started getting my foot in the door, essentially. So tell us a little bit about the job in Brisbane and what happened. How long were we in Brisbane for?
We were there for 2 years. The job was essentially the same that I did in South Africa, but the challenge was in Australia, there was not a similar carbon copy type of service available in the market. So the service was foreign. So there's a lot of education involved in selling the offering, which created a few challenges, upon which I would say the investors decided to part and each go their own way, which left an opportunity for us again to decide what do we want to do.
And while we were in Brisbane, we actually bought our first home in Australia. Can you remember that?
I do, fondly.
I'm sure he says fondly because those were the days before we had little humans in our lives, and things were a little bit easier in terms of doing what you want whenever you want. So what did we do with every weekend that we had when we were living in Brisbane?
We baked. Just a joke.
That's an ad that he's referring to.
Just a joke. The property that we bought was on a golf estate, so we played golf most weekends.
Not just one day of the weekend, mostly Saturday and Sunday. And it was a beautiful, beautiful golf estate, because why wouldn't you play golf all the time if you live on a golf estate? And Carl was kind enough to teach me how to play golf. We had fun. We had loads of fun.
The hacker coach. That is the hacker being the coach.
He can play really well. I think so. None of us play off really good handicaps. We call golf our handicap usually, our ability or inability, but we just absolutely enjoyed it.
We work well, very well on the golf course, because I like to hit it and she likes to look for balls.
Yes. I'm one of those people who like to find things. Yeah, Scotty off.
Who remembers Scott?
Comment down below if you're old like we are. We're really giving away our age here. We have no problem with sharing our age anyway. I'm 43 and you are? Older. Okay. Easy. But yes, so we really had a great time in Brisbane. Enjoyed our life there as a double income, no kids family, because I was working I managed to find a job in the end. I haven't said this actually. I was working in software. So the university that I worked for while I was a student doing my master's degrees, the software that they use to run their student systems is actually software that's written by a company in Brisbane. And so when I moved to Brisbane and I started applying for jobs, I happened to be successful in applying for a job at the software house where they actually make the software, write the software, develop it, that I used to work on while I was working at Curtin University. So it was great. And they were happy to have me and I was happy to have a job. And this is where I started learning all about software. Lots and lots of learning about software. I was actually the customer support assistant or customer support person, and had never really done anything in software before other than working as you do in an office on a software system, adding in customer contacts. So anyway, that was great. The company is called Technology One, and I learned so much on the job. It was incredible. Really enjoyed it. We decided to move back to Perth because we started in Perth. And that was when your company decided to close their doors. The company that he went over to go and work for, they decided to close their doors, and I was missing my family just so much. And they were all in Perth because at this point in time, my brother, who used to be in South Africa, of course, had also moved over to Perth in the meantime while we were living in Brisbane. And a fun fact about my brother and this chap here is that they are best friends. So what did Magnus say to you back in the day?
He always nagged me.
In South Africa?
Back in South Africa. Stuff. He was nagged me. No, I should move to Australia. I should make a plan. Because he was in planning. He said, no, I should move over to, why not move over to? And I said, okay. And years after now, I joke with him. I said, well, you nagged me, so I made a plan. I married your sister.
Who was already living in Australia. So Carl ended up coming to Australia long before my brother, or a few years before Magnus actually made it over to Australia. And Carl had a great time learning about the Australian market and how things work. While we were in Brisbane, I learned a lot about software and also Australian work environment. But at that point in time, it was just a good opportunity for us to reassess where we wanted to go. And having missed my family so dearly, and my brother, his best friend, having moved to Perth, in the meantime, we decided that we were going to go back to Perth. But we didn't announce that originally, that we were going to move back to Perth. What did we do?
We just rocked up.
We did. We surprised everybody. It was going to be my 30th birthday. Well, it was actually my 30th birthday in that year. But a friend of mine and I have our birthdays very close to each other, 4 days apart. And she decided that she will organize a birthday party, her 30th, to celebrate. And because we had the same circle of friends, she invited everybody that I knew as well, and my parents were there as well. And the next moment, we obviously didn't tell anybody that we were coming. We'd organized everything secretly, and I walked into this venue where they were all just celebrating Yolandi's birthday. And here we were. And I can still remember my mum and my dad's face when they looked at me and you coming in at the door of the venue, and they were in disbelief. That, like, Shamany, Carl, what are you doing here? And initially they thought, oh, we're just surprising them with a visit. And then it was like, well, you know what? It's going to be a bit longer than just a visit. We have moved back. And they were stoked. So then we spent many, many, many years after that in Western Australia, which is an incredibly beautiful state. I love Western Australia. And yeah, we've lived in Western Australia for
12.
Many years. 12. Okay. Who's doing the maths?
12-ish.
12-ish years. Anyway. So many years, and bought our second house in Perth because we sold the one in Brisbane later after a few years. And have been calling Perth home ever since. It's been a beautiful journey to live on both sides of Australia. But what did we do as well that made us, I would say, like, see the rest of Australia? We always get these, not always, but often we get these little interesting things that come across our mind to try out.
Yeah, I was just thinking now while we're telling our story, a lot of the decisions sound like we make really quick, impulsive decisions. Well, they're very seldom impulsive, but they're usually very quick. Big decisions. So, yes. Fast forward a few years, obviously. I received long service leave. I assume this is the story we're telling.
Yes. It's not a story, it's a real thing.
I was eligible for long service leave, and we decided, okay, why don't we take that, we'll break it up in 2 chunks, and we will charge up into Asia for a few months, and then we'll come back, and then later on we'll charge over to the US and Mexico for a few months, and then COVID was welcomed into society, which slammed the door on all our plans. So that was put on ice for the time being for a few months. And then as soon as things started settling down, we decided, oh, well, and if that's the case, Monica was what? In school, year one?
Yes, it's a year and a half ago.
Yeah. So we decided, well, never going to be easier than now. Let's take a 4-month gap and we'll do a big lap. We'll take a gap to make a lap.
And so we did, because you only live once and life is short.
For those of you that don't know, big lap means a lap right around Australia.
True, yes. And how far is that? How far do you drive to go around Australia? Can you remember in kilometers?
Yeah, roughly round figure, it's about 16,000 kilometers.
Yeah, no, just like a weekend kind of trip.
I mean, you can do longer if you go in and out of a lot of places, stuff like that. But we didn't have the vehicle to do that, and we didn't really have the time to do that because it generally takes a minimum of 4 months. So we didn't really have any time up our sleeve to do too much gallivanting and sightseeing in terms of staying weeks on end in one spot. So we didn't.
There's no time for that. Life is too short, and we just had to keep going because we needed to get back to Perth. We needed to give the motorhome back, and you needed to go back to work.
So from there, the 100 sunsets. Because you said you'll touch on it again.
Yes, that's right. So it's a work trip actually that we did because we, for Shamany TV, decided to vlog the Australian dream. And the Australian dream traditionally is to drive the big lap, to drive right around Australia. And we thought there's never going to be a better time than then for us to do it. And we made it literally a series. We would do 100 sunsets right around Australia. And we literally vlogged every day on the trip. So it's not a compilation of the best of the trip. It is like a real life experience. Essentially, if you watch that series with us, and the first 25 episodes are already on my channel, but it is literally like what you would be seeing and experiencing every day for driving around Australia in a motorhome for 100 days. Did you have fun?
Heaps. And just to come back to things as well, you're never going to find the perfect timing to do something like that. And a lot of big sort of decisions in life, it's never the best timing. You just need to sort of make a decision. How big is priority is it? And just bite the bullet and just do it. Because otherwise we would still be waiting.
Yep.
Because things like that, to wait for the best moment. Well, kids grow up and then they grow older and then they have this program and then they have that sport with a team, and it just gets more difficult and more difficult. You just need to just do it.
There's never going to be a perfect time. We went with a 1-year-old, a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 7-year-old. Some people called us crazy. But as I said, it was actually pretty much a business decision that we wanted to be able to vlog this so that we can bring it to Shamany TV. And so I was actually we were both working this whole trip because it was camera gear up, camera gear down, planning the videos, which angles to take, editing on the road, and uploading videos and downloading this and that. So it was
no reception.
Oh, yeah, because you know what? There is not internet right around Australia. So the things we learned about what gear to use and what not to use, because you cannot upload to the cloud everywhere, was it was interesting as well. We used to have the gimbal in the beginning, remember that one? Yep. And what happened is you obviously gimbal on the telephone gimbal, and then it would just upload to the cloud. And then it started becoming a problem because there was no more cloud to upload to and no more storage on the telephone. So it was like, oh dear, we need to make another plan on how we're going to do this. And if I wanted to edit, I could not just download from the cloud and start editing like you can do in any city. So anyway, so we had to rejig how we were doing that. The point is just it was a family trip, but it was actually a work trip, so that we can bring the Australian dream to you. And it was incredible for us to be able to experience going right around Australia and seeing little towns and the in-between places that we would not necessarily have seen otherwise. Okay, so we did that. We made it through COVID. Nobody got COVID on our trip, which was the first year of COVID. And it was, most people said to us, how can you go? Because it's COVID. We're like, well, we're just going to go. And we just kept driving.
And we managed to get through all states without having to quarantine, because each state had their own COVID rules and regulation and lockdowns and whatever you want to call it. And we managed to, hook by crook, made it through.
Loved it. And probably we get people asking us, would we do it again? The answer is in a different way. We're glad that we did it the way we did it, in a motorhome. At that stage, it was the best decision for us because we only had 4 months. And so we needed to keep moving. But if we do it again, we would want more time. We would want to have a 4x4 with a caravan that we can hook and unhook and be able to go to the off-road kind of areas, because with the motorhome that we rented, we were stuck to the main roads most of the time. So that concluded our big lap around Australia, and we really enjoyed every moment of it. And I would definitely suggest that once you make your way over to Australia, you put that on your bucket list as well to do.
And also, just it's not easy to have a 4-month break. But what we discovered is you can actually break this up into chunks, because you can hire these motorhomes or similar type of vehicles in any of the major cities and some of the smaller cities, larger regional towns. So you can do chunks. Say you're stationed in Brisbane, hire one in Brisbane and drive to Sydney, or fly up to Cairns, get one there and drive down to Brisbane. Or if you want to go across, you can get one in Broome and drive through the top to Cairns. Or something. Like break it up in 2 chunks.
Pieces, yeah.
Because you don't necessarily need to see all of it. There's lots of nothing in between, but that is part of the experience. So, but yeah.
So other questions we get asked is, how did we school the kids? Well, luckily our only child that was really school age as such at that point was Monaco, who was in year 1 at that point in time. So we just, and Bordeaux was in kindy, which means he was doing, what do you call that? Yeah, it was 2 days on, 3 days off. So it's like a half-time program. And we literally just pulled them out of the school for a term. And we decided not to homeschool on the road. We were just going to live life as a family on the road and enjoy it, and what we like to call world school. So just teach them as we go, and it seemed to work well.
They learned
I say teach them how we go. Like, we didn't take textbooks and things, but we would just...
They learned a lot, nothing on a curriculum, but the questions never stop. Well, kids that age, the questions never stop. And as you start explaining something, it just leads to more questions and more questions. Quite often, you don't actually get to answer the first one because of all the chained questions that comes along. But they just like absorbs it all. And then the next time they like realize, oh, this and that, oh, that's like, yeah, great. You don't realize how quickly and how much they learn in an experience like this. So there was no need to specifically school. I mean, numbers is everywhere.
But luckily, the school gave us permission to take the kids out of school for the term, and said that when we get back, they would be happy to accept them into the next year. And so we got back in the January, and the children just went back to school. And it was as if they hadn't missed anything. So that was great. We just slotted right back into the thicker things. Tell us a little bit about your work experience in Australia and how you find the morale and the culture in the workplace, because you've worked in how many workplaces here now? About 4? 5 different jobs, give or take.
Give and take, yeah. So not that many, considering the time span, but jobs are usually, there's two things involved, and whether, I don't know, in my opinion, that determine how you enjoy your job or not, apart from specifically what you do, your field of experience. And that is the culture of the business, and then your direct report, your boss. Those two things play a big part in terms of how you experience the job. Generally speaking, work culture is very good here, I found. Does it mean 100% of every single business out there? Well, probably no. But I was lucky enough that I worked in a very good cultural type of experience every time. And most of the times, my direct boss was great. What is a little bit different here is there is a high social element connected to the workplace. Employees tend to, well, most businesses arrange social events for the employees, and that is well received and well attended by employees. So that usually add to good morale overall. Doesn't mean that there's not times where you slog away and work hard. I've probably done more after hours or extra hours in Australia than what I did in South Africa. But I mean, it's probably also because you evolve in your professional life as well. So you tend to do more, you have more responsibilities, so you just adjust accordingly. But all in all, I've not had any major issues in the working environment here.
Yeah.
Most of them were very good. Most of my bosses were extremely good.
Well, so, it was good enough that you stayed for almost 12 years at your previous job.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, and tell me a little bit about what you like the most about living in Australia.
That is a good question. And I often get asked this, or we, if we go and visit or back in South Africa. So what it's like, and it's like, well, it's difficult to explain to people what is it like? And I usually tend to say, well, it's similar to what we've experienced back in the 80s or 90s. Now, if you're not old enough to know that, it was just free. You could go places, you can just go. I mean,
yeah, so this is in South Africa,
yeah.
The 80s and 90s growing up. Yeah.
My dad always believed not to lock a car, because if somebody wanted to take something inside, they're going to break a window, regarding whether it's, so if it's unlocked, they can just open up and take it, but take it, they're going to take it. So I grew up with not locking cars. Sometimes we forgot to lock the doors. With go to your friends and come back whatever time of night. Not silly stuff, but I was lucky. I was the youngest by far, so I had a lot of freedom in terms of going around. But it was not. There was no fear of safety back then, and it's sort of very similar. It doesn't mean there's no crime here. There's always going to be crime everywhere in the world. I mean, the world has evolved in that sense, but there's generally not a threat of life.
And the crime is so much less.
Crime is not a real issue. Generally speaking, people are, I don't know, at peace, relaxed.
Yeah. Tomorrow's another day, mate. She'll be all right, mate.
Doesn't mean life is slow. I mean, it's fast paced, but nothing is so critical that it takes over everything in your life. I mean, what comes first is what should come first. And as soon as somebody is in a some sort of a crisis, everybody just say, okay, well, don't worry about anything. Don't worry about work. Don't, just go. Attend to your problem. We'll cover and sort things out. When you're back, we'll carry on as normal. And that's sort of the theme that goes on in society around everybody and everything. If there's a crisis, everybody jumps in and attends to that where they can, or sort of keep everything else working on the other side while someone's attending to the problem. So that's part of the culture. Apart from that, I mean, it's outdoor, it's sunny, it's sport, it's everything. It's very much a outdoor sport culture, which is very similar to what it was in South Africa. So
yeah,
in that sense, it's easy. And the whole world's become a lot more cosmopolitan in the sense that there's people from everywhere.
Literally. Yeah. I think Australia has people from every country in the world that lives here. Yeah, originally. So did it turn out to be for you what you thought it would be living overseas? I don't think you spent too much time thinking about that for years, because before you moved here, because you didn't anticipate moving overseas.
I think also if you think about, I want to go and live overseas, it's like, well, that is very wide in terms of a description. I want to go and live overseas for a few years. Well, where? You can go to Iceland, or you can go to Brazil, which will be vastly apart, or you can go to Thailand, or you can go to Egypt. Like, oh. it's nothing, no comparison, nothing alike. So it's not what I would have expected to say live in Europe, but so it shouldn't. I always thought, yeah, Australia would probably not be the first place I go to, because it's too similar to South Africa. But in that also, it makes it very easy to have done the move here, because there are so many similarities.
Well, it depends on what you're after. So if you want to go somewhere because you want to go and live there, or you want to go on a holiday, I like to go on holiday to places where it's particularly different to what I'm used to on a day-to-day basis, because then it feels more like it's a holiday to me. Whereas for me to decide where I want to go and live for the rest of my life kind of decision would be to find a place that's more similar to what I'm used to, just with ideally as many as possible good points to it, not just minimizing the negative points. So somewhere where I feel that I would be able to associate with. But you moved to Australia without having lived or been to any other country before, and you've been here for 16 years now. Would you do it again?
Yes, I probably just would have done it sooner. If I can replay, I'll do it sooner.
What do you mean, marrying me sooner or moving to Australia sooner?
No, well, both.
Just checking.
Just saying.
That's the right answer.
Well, yeah, and look, hindsight is 2020, so you'll make some decisions different. But yeah, I just would have come sooner. Because then you can realize how things are different here. And you will realize sooner how to identify opportunities and then do things slightly different. But all in all, if I have to go back and not have any of the knowledge that I have now, the know-how knowledge, would I do it again? Yes, I will do exactly the same again.
Yeah. Has it been easy all the time?
No.
What has been the hardest thing for you about settling into Australia or living here?
Nothing is. All right, I'm going to flip that question around.
Oh dear, you're going to ask me.
No. No. I'm going to ask, well, not ask, but sort of pose the question back. Moving to Australia or immigrating anywhere in the world is just a big decision, and it's a big change. But if you want to change jobs and cities in South Africa, if you're going to go to a new job out of Joburg for a new job in Cape Town, it's going to be different. Culture is, I've done it, so I know. Culture is slightly different. making friends there is slightly different. Well, when I did it, it was more so than now because half Joburg's already Cape Town now. But say, or Durban for that matter, you still have your old friends, but you don't see them every day. You just don't go up for a braai or barbecue every weekend because it's not that easy. Immigrating is very much similar. You still, well, technology these days makes it very easy to communicate. The time difference is an issue, but apart from that, everything is still the same. So was it difficult? Yes, but not more so than any big change in your life. Is it more difficult to move to Australia than to get into parenthood? I don't know. Both is life-changing, but it's just change. It's just a change that you go through. You adapt, you grow up, you evolve.
Inherently, people, you kick against change because your brain wants to keep you with what it's known and what's safe. And that's something that the brain has known for a while. So the concept of change in itself is hard, just straight out of the rank like that. But to do a big change, obviously, is even harder. That said, it depends on what your why is. And that's my opinion. Why do you want to go? Why do you want to make the change in this situation? Why do you want to move to Australia? And if your belief is that it's going to be a better future for you and your family, well, then going through that change is an easy, it's not easy, but it's easier. It makes it easier to just stick it out and go through it. And in the end, if it was just that easy, everybody would have been doing it. But it's not always that easy. Firstly, to get into Australia is pretty damn hard. Okay. And
look, it's like getting fit and losing weight. It's not easy for anybody.
It's worth it.
It takes commitment, but once you're there, it was worth it. And it's not a quick fix. It's not a quick thing. It's a lot of things you need to work on consistently over time. But yeah, if the reason don't change, then the motivation shouldn't change. Doesn't matter that it's doesn't mean that it's equal, easy, or difficult every day. That goes through ups and downs too. But life is short.
Yeah.
You should set yourself up to enjoy it and not just, I don't know,
just make it through another day. Well, we're certainly trying to tick off bucket lists items as we go along all the time, and living life to the fullest. For me, the hardest thing about having migrated to Australia was in the beginning when I literally had no friends. I had nobody. I could not even pick up my phone and call or text one single person to say, hey, can we go and have a coffee? Or how are you? Or what do you like? I knew nobody in Australia, zero, except my mum and my dad. Okay, which is great. I'm very fortunate that I had them. But at that point in time, I was 26 years old, 25, 26. And so I was already an adult. And I was living my own life in South Africa. I was doing living on my own, working, earning my own income. And then when I moved to Australia, suddenly I was a student again. I was dependent on living with my parents. And it was hard in that regard. Not because of my parents. They did an amazing job at housing me and putting up with this adult who became a student again, full-time student, because you have to be a full-time student if you come and study in Australia on a student visa. But it was literally that stage where at that age, 25, all my friends in South Africa were still partying. They were still having a royal time. No kids, almost no responsibilities. You always had money for stuff, even though it wasn't a lot, but there was always money to go around and do some fun stuff. And I remember struggling with social media posts and learning how all my friends are doing these fun things in South Africa. And I had nobody that I could even contact for a coffee.
Well, luckily it was before the days of Facebook.
Yes, I'm trying to think. It would have been, but I was very aware of what everybody was doing in South Africa at that point in time.
Yeah, but you would have been because you would keep on texting them.
Yeah, the information was shared with me. And then as Facebook became a thing, I learned more and more about how everybody is having fun. And I felt like, oh, well, I can't be having fun because I don't know anybody. So I was a student, but because I was an adult student, I was much older than the other students who go to university at 18. I didn't really, and I was doing a postgraduate, I was doing a master's degree. I was not in that same sphere of the young kids who go to university for the first time around. And so I didn't quite fit in with the crowd that was doing their full-time studies at that point in time. And I found that a lot of the other international students who were in Australia at the university that I was came with their families. So they had their little, group of people that they were hanging out with. And the Australian students who were there from the first year, the young ones, 18 years of age, they were doing their thing as well. So I felt a little bit, and I just needed to figure out how to make friends and get myself settled. So I joined the church. So I didn't join the church to make friends. I joined the church because we're church-going kind of people, and we really enjoy going to church. But I found that being there and then starting to join the choir in church and getting more involved and volunteering, it has actually given me that opportunity to make friends and find a telephone number that I could put into my phone, just so that at any point in time in the week I needed to feel like I can text somebody. I can go, how are you? Or I remember the first day distinctly when I felt like I started to belong in Australia was when I walked in a shopping centre and I recognized one person's face. It wasn't a good friend or anybody. It was just like, wow, like, look who's there. I thought to myself, because Carl wasn't here at that point yet, like, wow, there's somebody that I recognize. This one face out of this, because hundreds and hundreds of other people that I see on a daily basis. And I'm like, wow, this feels good, because I had all this new stuff around me for so long, nobody that I could speak to essentially as like somebody that I knew. And then I just recognized one person's face that I had seen at church, a few weeks earlier. So that was a great feeling for me. And then from there on, it just built up, and I started making more friends at university, and I started joining the university's services that they have and working at the university, and made a few more friends there. So yes, that was the hardest for me at that stage, because of my age, knowing that all my friends in South Africa were partying and having a ball, and I was here feeling a little bit alone. But I was determined to make it work, because I left South Africa for a different reason to what Carl left South Africa for. He, I like to think, just came for me. Yes, he did. I was to say, show my wedding ring, but I don't have it on yet. Do you have one on? See, good. When I'm at home, I usually take off my wedding rings.
Yeah, well,
I only have
you bought
one.
it well, because it can't come off.
Yeah. Anyway, because when I put my hands in the water in and out and so on, as you tend to do as a mum, So anyway, so I left South Africa because I was literally scared of being murdered every single day of my life. Like, there was not a day that went past that I was not concerned about my safety. And if you start living a life like that, you just realize that something's got to change. I've always had a dream as a little girl that one day I would be living overseas. I was fortunate enough to travel around the world, or traveling to different countries in the world as a child with my parents. And so there was always this seed that was planted from early years on, thinking, what would it be like to live in another country? And so when I left school in 1996, I finished my matric, my final year of school in South Africa, went to university at University of Pretoria. Things in South Africa started changing and becoming just incredibly, or in quite a lot more unsafe than what it used to be. And they started breaking into my cars. I remember sleeping in Marderleaf Corsairs. That was the residence that at University of Pretoria where I went and lived in for 2 years while I was doing my first 2 years of Bachelor of Commerce at University of Victoria. And I could hear the car alarms going off, the one after the other, as people were breaking into the cars that were parked in the street right outside of the residence. And knowing that my car was also parked in that street, and then they smashed my window one night, and I had a car alarm, it went off, but you know what? They got so used to the fact that the police wasn't going to respond, nothing was going to happen, that it wouldn't even deter them. So they'll take a break, they'll hit the window out, and they'll just unlock the car, open the door, get in, sit conveniently, and take everything out of the car that they want, back it in, and then they go not 100 meters on, they go literally to the car right next door, smash the window, open, and so on and so on. So anyway, so from that stage onwards, it was just, to me, I realized things are getting worse and people were just getting murdered left, right, and center. And I was scared that would happen to me. So I decided I needed to leave for my own safety. And I could not imagine raising a family in a country like that where I would need to, I would never be able to safeguard them. Now, as Carl said, you get crime everywhere in the world, all right? It's just a matter of the type of crime, the severity, and the proportion of it that happens. So I wanted to leave South Africa, and I started thinking about what other options were around. I spent some time in the UK, a few months in the UK before. So I've traveled and been on a holiday to a number of countries overseas, but ultimately settled on the fact that Australia was going to be more like the lifestyle that we were once living in South Africa. And at that stage, my parents had then decided to also make the move to Australia, and they came over first. And so I came 3 years after them. But because I was over the age of 26 when I moved to Australia, I could not be added onto their visa. And so I had to come on my own accord, and I applied to come to Australia as an international student and study here. So that's my journey. Did a couple of master's degrees and then applied for permanent residency, and then decided later on, when we moved back to Perth from Brisbane, after your job finished in Brisbane, and I started working again at the university that I used to work for before we left, then I started to think about doing a PhD. As you do, when you finish your studies, you say, never again, like I'm done. I have worked so hard. You're so glad that you've got that degree now. And it's not like after two master's degrees, I'm like,
she doesn't have a good thing.
I'm done. I'm done studying, finished. This is it. It didn't last too long. I think it was about 4 years later, something like that. I found myself doing my PhD at Curtin University again. And I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship to study my PhD. So they paid me a stipend. And so I could do my PhD on a full-time basis. But then I also was working part-time, lecturing at the university, and became very much involved in the student association at the university. Led them there as the president of the Postgraduate Student Union, and then later on became the president of the national, called CAPA, the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations. So they're the group that looks after all the postgraduate student associations around Australia, and they represent over 350,000 students. That's postgraduate students every year in Australia. So so that was my gig, doing that, and then learned a lot about politics in Australia, which I didn't know much of before, because in South Africa, the last thing you wanted to learn about was politics. So it was very interesting, and I just learned so much during my time there. And that's it. I said, after my PhD, when I finally got my PhD, I said, that's it, no more studies. But I did study again after that, and I'm about to study again now. So Australia's been really good for us. I cannot imagine raising my children anywhere else. We have been fortunate and blessed with 4 little miracle children. I say little miracle because they're miracle children. They are all IVF babies. literally all 4 of them. It was a hard journey to get there, to have them. We weren't lucky every time on the first go, so it took lots of takes, but God blessed us with our kids, and there's nothing more important to us in our lives than raising them to become happy, healthy kids, respectful, I hope, kindness is really important to us. And we always refer back to South Africa when we speak to the children. They speak fluently Afrikaans, all 4 of them,
That
even
is
though they were
sometimes
born
a
here.
challenge.
Yes.
Getting them to be kind, especially to one another.
Yes. Well, yeah. As long as they remember to be kind when they're around other people. But you know what? Sibling rivalry will always be part of life. I'm sure it happens in the Queen's house as well. And the Queen and the Prince, and the Queen's children are a bit adult now, but her grandchildren, grandchildren almost these days. So yes, it's been good. Australia's been good for us, and I cannot imagine. I will never return to South Africa to go and live there again. I mean, we've been back a few times to go on holiday, but we will never return on a permanent basis again. All Carl's family is still in South Africa. I'm fortunate that both my parents and, well, they're married, but my parents and my brother is in Australia. I only have one sibling, so my immediate family is here. But other than that, all our extended family is still in South Africa, and we've had people come and visit us, and we've been back a few times.
Yeah.
But blessed and privileged to be here.
Again, for me, life is short. I would like to live quite a few more places, but different places where I haven't been. Will I get there? I don't know. Probably likely it's probably slim, but I don't know. I'm not a huishen.
I don't know what's that in English. In Afrikaans, it's huishen. In English, Afrikaans, as you can tell, is our first language.
It's probably not the right description either, because that just means like staying at home.
You're not stuck in one spot.
Yeah, for me is home can be many places. Not all at once, but I mean,
home to us, because we've had this conversation. Home to us is not anything that's related to brick and mortars or to a specific city or location as such. Home to us is where we are as a family, and that's what's important to us. So we can go and live anywhere else. We can go and park in a tent, and we could make that home as well. That could be home for us. Well, we did that in a motorhome for a few months. But yes, it's literally for us, it's home is not where any specific person lives or a specific building or a specific country or whatever as such. For us, home is where we are and where our children are. And it's the environment that we create as a family to make it a warm and loving place for them to be and experiencing life and enjoying life, because life is fleeting. Life is short. I'm 43 here. I can remember when I was 23 and I thought about people being 43 and I thought, oh my goodness, I'm like, oh, old. And now I'm 43 and I'm thinking, where has the last 20 years gone? I don't feel old at all. I still feel like a 23-year-old in many aspects. So yes.
Just much more clever.
Yes, I definitely have learned a lot in the last 20 years. But the point is now, what you were saying is, I said that I cannot imagine raising my children anywhere else. I can definitely, as Carl said, I can imagine taking our children to another country for short periods of time and experiencing their culture, most definitely. And we'd actually like to do that. We've been wanting to do that for a few years. But Australia would still be the country that we would return to.
Australia is probably one of the better choices as a base for something like that. If you want to sort of become a temporary nomad, I think this is a very good base to do it from. And you can't really do too much, be too nomady I don't like that word.
Gypsy-like.
With kids, so that makes it difficult. I mean, you don't want to be 6 months here, 6 months there, 6 months there.
But you could do it if it's for a short period of time. Like if you do it for 2 years, you could just knock it out, and then going back to
6 months is difficult. But if you do 2 to 3 years, then.
But the difference now is that because we have Australian passports and we're citizens, I would not be scared to go and do that, like go and experience other parts of the world at all, because I know that I can always return to Australia, and that I will be returning to Australia after that period of time, and that I'll be okay because I've got my blue passport. So yeah, that's been our journey to Australia. If you have any questions for us around, how did we do certain things, or how we settled in, or what we, anything else that you wanted to know, feel free to pop them in the comment section below. We're happy to answer it. Any words of advice from your side for people considering making the move to Australia?
Yes, I do. If you got to a point where you're considering it, obviously there are certain things in your life that pushed you into a direction. If it's just adventure, well then, why are you still there? If it is negative aspects that push you to search for a more positive environment, well, in a case like that, or if it's something that you consider due to opportunities, maybe for yourself or later on for your kids, I would say, well, is the environment going to change or make a turnaround to you not feeling that way or not thinking that way? Then ponder on it. But if you're of the opinion that I got to this point and this is where I see myself ending up for the reasons that you put there, then don't delay. The longer you delay, the more difficult it gets, both for you and if you have children, for your children as well. The sooner you go, the easier it is. If I could have changed something on mine, I would have come earlier. Would it made the initial part easier? Probably, I don't know. Maybe yes, maybe no. It's not the point. It is from there onwards. The more time you have, the more, I don't know, the more you can enjoy the fruit of your effort of doing so. And there's lots of fruit here.
Thank you so much for joining me on this special episode, 100 Shamany TV episodes. And if you have enjoyed watching this, please give us some love down below, like the video, share it with a friend, and drop us a comment. We would love to hear from where you were watching this, which country, which city, and if you would be moving to Australia or want to move to Australia as well at some point in the future. We love having you and appreciate every single one of you watching every episode with us. All right. We'll see you in the next one next week.
All right. So thank you so much for joining me today. If you had fun, please remember to hit that subscribe button, and then it'll make sure that you never miss a thing. I'll see you same time and same place next week. Bye for now.